Got it? Okay, we're on location, filming in the park. We got here on bikes, just doing the opening scene for the mirror. We had to shoot some scenes in the woods. The seed that started the idea for the movie Mirror was really something I read when I was 19 or 20 years old from a book written by Annie Besant, who was a declared clairvoyant at the time, which was the turn of the century, during the time of spiritualism. And she, in this book, was detailing what it is like to be a clairvoyant. And I remember one specific example she gave. She happened to walk in the dark one evening past a cemetery. Even though it was pitch black, of course, she could see the remnants of the electrical body of each of the deceased, which was floating above the gravesite. It was a very, very vivid impression in my mind. It was something that stuck in my mind for, obviously, decades. What we were trying to do was make an old-fashioned, scary cemetery movie. Our approach initially was to go into it kind of nuts and bolts and describe in detail what was happening. But what we found was we were getting clogged up in trying to describe in too much definite detail with creating the imagery rather than using suggestion and letting the mind of the viewer create the image. Most of the movie, or at least half of the movie, is myself narrating what's happening during the trance session that the hypnotherapist is putting Alex Green under. The imagery is coming from what is being talked about, and what we try to do is let the imagination of the viewer take part and engage the viewer in this, and let his imagination create the pictures of what was happening, and let Alex Green just narrate and describe what he was seeing or what he had seen. Some of the methods we used to create what we wanted the viewer to see in Mirror. We tried some animation, which we used minimally in the end, but we did try some other creative things, especially in actual darkness outdoors. The contrast was rather ghostly, and you can see that in the car scene where Alex escapes out of the cemetery, and here you see a surreal, glaring image that's cast in contrast by darkness. We also use that in some of the end effects, where we use the darkness in a fog machine backlit with flood lamps. And that gave us a fiery inferno effect in the darkness. My approach to filmmaking, I'm new to most of this, but when we came up with the idea of a film, I really approached it. I have been in the music business for most of my life, and I realized that creating music is actually channeling emotion. When you can channel that emotion and make the viewer or the listener experience the emotion that you're putting forward or putting out, that's a successful form of art. I wanted the viewer to feel the emotion that Alex felt when he first opened up that doorway to the dead, when he was being pursued by forces he couldn't describe or couldn't even really detail in his mind. And it took a hypnotist to unveil and unravel all that. My main goal was to portray the emotion, the raw emotion of all those things, the horror, the fright, the wonder also. Another thing that's important to me was the sound. You're seeing an image, for example, of an entity coming out of the cemetery. The type of sound was very important. You're thinking most of it is visual, and it is, but a lot of the visual is enhanced or degraded by the sound that accompanies it. So it was very important. It's very suggestive, and I found it a very powerful tool if used right. Some of the obstacles we had were trying to go by the book. We had a script, we ran with it, we filmed every word and put it all together, and we had a hugely boring movie. And this was very frustrating because we didn't know how to deal with it. We told our story, we didn't understand why it was boring. We had to stop a few times and rethink and go back and try again. And we realized that when you're writing a script and you're reading it is one thing. You have to read it to your mind in order for your mind to understand it and build the imagery. But when you're doing the visuals and the audio behind it, there's so much more information getting into you more quickly that you don't have to state every word. The imagery and the sound tells paragraphs of information. So we were able to take out a lot of the dialogue that was artistically unnecessary, because with the right timing of imagery and sound and the right kind of mood music being placed in the background and at the right volume, we could eliminate pages of dialogue by just letting you experience one feeling. And like, he's scared, he's running, and you hear the sound, you hear the dogs, you hear the rustling leaves, something's following you. You don't need to describe it much more than that. You know that you want to get the hell out of there, and that's what we were looking for. Derek and I clashed a lot with, Derek wanted to go by the book, in which he was trained, and I really had no training. I was an artist. I went by the emotion of it, and we clashed because he wanted to do it his way and I wanted to do it my way. But when we listened to it and watched it back, it just was not happening. And it wasn't because it was bad, it was just because we weren't really opening our eyes to the whole thing. And I came up with a motto later on in the movie, which was this: the art is the God. And that meant that I don't care if we spent 3.5 weeks on a scene or 2 scenes, if it muddled or fudged up the movie or the flow of the movie, snip, 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 gone. And when the viewer clicked that button to turn it on and watch it, I didn't want them to think about one other thing or look away from that screen until they saw the end credits. Well, some interesting stories are the mirror had mysterious properties. It could see things buried in the ground. And some of the props that we used weren't really props, they were metals that I had found in my house. They were actually Navy medals awarded posthumously for my step-uncle, Howard Jaquin. He had died in Corregidor, and it gave us some background when we looked at these things. We had it on camera, we showed medals. I dug a war medal out of the tree as a valuable item. But it made us think that, wow, this is my uncle that gave his life. Another interesting point was the woman that actually was named the character of Aunt Paula was actually the picture of a person named Joyce Robinson, who worked as a waitress in my mom and dad's restaurant in Canastota, New York back in the 50s. Other interesting points are, it's kind of awkward carrying around a mirror in the cemetery with people driving by, and you're going, like you're seeing something horrible, and people are driving by going, you know, what is he seeing? I guess that's part of the collateral damage when you're making movies. So we would film and get the hell out of there. Other than that, we didn't really do much public filming in this one. The location really we had to go to was Assumption Cemetery, where we filmed most of the grave marker scenes. That was really the only location outside of my car and the backyard. But we did travel to one of the locations, which was a wooded area a few blocks from our house near a park, and Derek and I made our way up there on bikes, where we filmed me running in slow motion. And I think there was one other spot we filmed my car where I was working, and also we used another spot for the actual location of Dr. Wester's clinic. Undisclosed location. Okay, here it is in the park. We're going to be heading back now. I think we got what we need for the opening shot.
Yeah, I'm here half in my pajamas.
Yeah, I made him get out of his pajamas.
Almost 9 o'clock at night.
I made him get out of his pajamas. Okay,
All right.
that's good.